It is really a site of modern day slavery today. There's walls that are 12 foot high, barbed wire. There's no escape. I remember one case where I had this young man who was Ugandan. When we got him out, he was telling me his story, and it hadn't quite clicked in his head at the time. And talking about selling him from one to another. And when he heard it come out of somebody else's mouth, he was like, "They sold me." And I said,
Yeah.
"Yeah, you were a slave. They sold you." And he just broke down and started crying. Like he was freed finally, but he broke down crying, understanding the magnitude of what he was put into and that he became part of this slave trade.
If you watch even a bit of the news these days, you could be forgiven for feeling like it's just a bit too dark out there. Like there just aren't any real heroes out there anymore. But there are, and we have one with us today. Right now, pig butchering scams are the biggest criminal enterprise in the world. They rob people of their life savings, and worse yet, they force innocent people into armed labor camps to do the scamming. Hundreds of thousands around the world. It's dark stuff, it really is. But Tana rescues people trapped in these compounds. He's rescued thousands, and he's helped them get back home. And he's with us today. Welcome to the Great Untold. I have to say, Judah, this is a dark subject in general, but you know, the light side of this is there are people like you actually doing extraordinary things. So thanks for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you for making this time.
Most of the people who are going to ever see this podcast, the victims of pig butchering scams are going to be, well, them, white, Western people in the States, in Canada, in the United Kingdom, across Europe and Australia, and non-speaking, you know, wealthy Westerners. But then there's this whole other subset of the people who are actually victimized. And those are the people who've been dragged there or been lured there.
We look at it like you said, there is two victims within this kind of scamming ideal. So you've got the victim that's in the compound, you've got the victim that's overseas. So or the Western victim in their home country.
How did you end up getting drawn into this work?
I grew up in this region. Well, I mean, I spent the last 20 plus years living along the borders of Thailand and Myanmar. And a lot of our NGO work, a lot of our work that we've been doing, saw me do some cross-border relationship work. So both in Myanmar and Thailand. So I had a lot of friends along the border. And one day we were just, a friend of mine was messaged from somebody inside the scam compound asking for help. And I really was thinking that this was just one of those, Nigerian prince scams or something like that. And so we kind of like played back a little bit, gave them a little bit of a what for, and told them, I need all your name and phone number and all this kind of different information. And so surprising that the young lady actually started to share everything about her life and her passport, her family's name, numbers, addresses. And I thought, wow, this is it's got to be pretty elaborate if this is a hoax. And so we contacted her embassy, and surely enough, they had just been aware of this human trafficking thing that was taking place. And at that time along the borderline, I mean, out of all of us NGOs sitting here, none of us knew anything about what was going on.
So, at what point do you go all in on this? What happens that you suddenly decide, I can't? I mean, you can run an NGO, but this is beyond the next level, isn't it?
There's some personal reasons why this side of justice fighting is so strong. And to just share, like very briefly,
Sure.
kind of around the time when this started, I had some major health issues that were growing in my life, and those health issues looked like I was perhaps at end of life stages after seeing doctors and things and being told, look, go home and live your best life was the line that he used. And for me, it was such a sinking feeling because what that meant was that there was no hope for me and I just had to live until I couldn't any longer. It was almost given me a reason to continue to fight. And so while I'm fighting my health battles, I'm also fighting for somebody else. And I think it gave me strength, it gave me purpose, it gave me something to put my life into. And I think that's probably why I fought so hard, because instead of going inward and perhaps collapsing under the pressure, you focus outward and you put all your efforts into something else. And I've done that now for the next last few years, and thankfully I'm still here. So
Yeah, no, there are just too many people counting on you for you to croak. I mean,
yeah.
you didn't laugh, which suggests to me that that actually weighs on you, that there is nobody behind you. If you guys stop, there are no others, are there? Or not enough?
It's been a tremendous lot of work in the last few months, even trying to get to this point where we're looking at finally being able to get these people home.
I mean, it's all tough work, but this is beyond the next level, isn't it?
Yeah. I think you kind of get pulled in like quicksand. I think you don't go in willingly. I think you get dragged in. So it's kind of like you're treading through it and you're like, I'm surviving, and then suddenly you realize you're not any longer and you give in to it and you just do what you can. I talk to trauma counselors all the time and they're like, Judah, you're way off the charts with what your trauma is like. You need to step out a little bit. But honestly, if we're not here to answer the phone, who is?
So that first call, that woman, was she inside a compound at the time when you got that call and she was giving you the personal information and she sort of made you realize this she wasn't part of a scam, she was a victim of a scam?
Yeah, so she was in one of the first compounds that was built in our region. It's known as KK Park. It's very infamous now. It's so large that it's now KK 1, 2, 3, and 4, and
Nice.
5. So they've subdivided as the city just grew. They became, with their own districts within that city. So we have 5 of them now. She was in one of the original buildings that were there. And so I was able to call into some of those offices and maybe ask for a favor in repayment for what we had done over the years in terms of healthcare, education,
Right.
those kind of things within the region. And you just called the right person, and they had the right level of authority to send a unit to the gates of the park and order that these 7 people get removed. And that's how it happened.
What year was
It
this?
was kind of like 2022.
It's,
So
it's
what
recent, right?
that's the scary part is that it's basically taken over every inch of this world and affected millions of lives, and it's taken billions of dollars away from people's hard-earned money, and essentially it becomes the largest criminal syndicate in the world.
We're talking about compounds with walls. We're talking about an armed presence, right?
There's walls that are 10, 12 foot high, barbed wire. There's guards sitting in towers with rifles pointed at you. You're put into a locked room that's got metal bars on your windows and a metal door on your bedroom door. So, I mean, there's no escape. I remember one case where I had this young man, I believe he was Ugandan, and when we got him out, he was telling me his story, and it hadn't quite kind of clicked in his head at the time. And he was like, why are they doing this? And, talking about selling him from one to another. And when he heard it come out of somebody else's mouth, he was like, they sold me. And I said,
Yeah.
yeah, you were a slave. They sold you. And he just broke down and started crying. Like he was freed finally, but he broke down crying, understanding the magnitude of what he was put into and that he became part of this slave trade.
It's completely mind-boggling. One of the sort of morning call to arms for the workers is this is World War III against the West. Go get them. Am I getting that right? I couldn't have made it up. I know that.
Well, yeah, yeah. I hope you didn't make it up.
I didn't make it up.
How it began was very much against the West. It was very much anti-America, anti-North America. I remember asking Russian when I first met him after he came out of his compound, scam compound, why? He said, "Well, they'd do it to us, so I'd do it to them." And it was this idea that for somehow he's getting back at America by scamming their citizens. Most people think like, oh, the naive people that go into these compounds. No, these people were highly educated. They're like, I've got a PhD in this and that. They built this elaborate scheme to
Sure.
convince people to come in. Then when they arrive, they go down and unfortunately they're basically held at gunpoint and taken across a river and put into a compound where they no longer can escape.
These operations recruited high-end mathematicians, computer scientists, and physicists to build their systems, and once they recruited them there, they kept them hostage until they finished building the technology. I mean,
Yeah.
that's diabolically fucked up.
With one of the victims that we helped to rescue through an operation, I mean, she had a team of people working with her, and they bludgeoned some of her team members to death in order to force her to keep going, to force her to work. And so, saying it's your responsibility for your team to keep them alive. And the only way you can do that is by preparing the technology. But what was stated by her was that she had access to anything she wanted in terms of bringing in all the technologies of the world so that she could then develop and work and coding and bringing in more and AI technologies and all the rest of it. Just an incredible amount of expertise. But that was not an isolated case. Like I said, from many of the victims that we saw coming out, I was like so amazed. You talk to them and they're like, I've got a PhD in this and that. And that's why even the recruiting program, most people think like, oh, the naive people that go into these compounds. No, these people were highly educated, and it's not uncommon to look for work abroad. They come from countries where they study abroad, and so they're also looking. I mean, our world is so small at the same time as it being so huge. And so, of course, you're educated, you come out with a PhD from your university, and you look to the entire globe to find where the best job is for you. And they came in and they looked at their name held on a sign at the airport, and then they got into the vehicle that was assigned to them, and they traveled with, and the recruiters held their hand the entire way. The
Sure.
organized crime syndicate, they put together such a convincing package, addresses and buildings, and they would do multiple Zoom calls and interviews with management teams, send out contracts. If you Googled or you looked into the company's names, there was websites, and so they built this elaborate scheme to
Sure.
convince people to come in. It wasn't that they were naive, it was that they thought so clearly through both how recruitment works and the psychology of a person looking for jobs, and made it so convincing that by the time they made it here, it was too late.
They would pay for flights as well, wouldn't they, sometimes?
Yeah, yeah, which is common. You take a job somewhere, your job's going to put you up for, pay for your flight to come in and get you set up. Then when they arrive, even to convince them to get down to the border, I mean, there's some that claim that they were drugged while they're in the vehicles, but for most of them, I mean, you come in and they say, okay, like you're going to be working in Bangkok, but we would like you to see the back end of the company you're working
Right.
for. So we're going to take you down to our warehouses and show you all of that. And then when you come back, you'll meet the management team and we'll get you started. But the boss has just called and said they want you to go down and check out the factory, check out the storage unit, meet the co-workers, meet those people that you'll be managing and your teams, and then you'll have a better idea of how that back end works so that you can come and do your job in Bangkok. And so that convinced them enough to say, yeah, sure, that makes sense. Why not? They go down, and unfortunately, they're basically held at gunpoint and taken across a river and put into a compound where they no longer can escape.
What goes through your mind when you realize that you're not dealing with poor villagers who've been lured to these places because they were looking for their first job or because they had debt, gambling debt or personal debt, but you're dealing with highly educated professionals who've completely been bamboozled?
Well, I mean, I guess the unfortunate side is now it's both. And then we're talking about the educated types that are also here. And so it's the spectrum is so broad now. It started in one direction and then it just filled with just whoever took the job and whoever came. So for example, a lot of people that come from educated backgrounds also have access to some kinds of money. And so they might be able to come up with their ransom payment sooner. Now, they're always so worried. What if I pay the ransom and they don't let me out? Which there is a few cases like that. But that's kind of where the negotiation side comes in, where our expertise comes in this. And if you've done it 1,000 times, you can say, okay, there is actually a process in place. And if you do pay this ransom, although we don't want you to have to give up more money to this criminal enterprise, but if you do, then these are the things that will take place, and you will end up coming to back to Thailand, Mesot, and we'll pick you up and we'll help you through the whole process. Then you've got the people that would have no chance of getting any money. I mean, just indebted already. They probably took loans in order to be able to get to Thailand. Um, the companies did not pay for them, they paid for their own flights. And that was, I mean, that's honestly when the company's paid for you, it's because they know that you're an educated person, they know your background, they know
Sure.
what you're going to be able to accomplish when you come in. When you're not, and you're coming in at the lower end of the, I guess, corporate chain, they have to pay for themselves, so they go to an enormous debt in order to come through. Those, I mean, you really have to be able to, I guess, nurture them through the whole process, which would look like a much longer process, perhaps working daily. And that's why we call it forced criminality, because there is no other choice but to survive. And to survive is you go to work. In KK Park, there's fake Starbucks and fake McDonald's. Like they've really made it a draw card that people that would be willing to scam and don't have an issue with the moral side of it. Some of the compounds, I mean, it's quite interesting, like how what their psychology in this is, because for those who are complicit scammers, now, I mean, there's a lot less abuse within the scam centers, and now you've got people that are complicit scammers that go in. They've got restaurants there, bars. They've got massage parlors. Obviously, they've got brothels, and then they've got these incredible nightclubs and karaoke rooms. It's again, it's just becoming the city. In KK Park, there's this fake Starbucks and fake McDonald's. Like they've really tried to, I guess, as they've increased, made it some like a draw card that people that would be willing to scam and don't have a issue with the moral side of it. Would be able to essentially live there for years and be happy to stay there and continue working.
So it becomes like a viable career choice for some people. Are they reasonably paid? Not, I'm not considering it as a career choice quite yet, but is the pay competitive compared to if you were working in a community village, in a farm, or where have you?
The majority don't. The majority work, don't get paid, get abused, tortured. You move over to more of a minority number of people that have actually made this work for them, or they move up management, and so they're able to get an income. Yes, it can be quite profitable for them. Some of the highest money earners would be the recruiters, and that's people that have lived there, identified just the level of abuse, and yet still call their friends and family and convince them to come under false pretenses. And then when they're there, just forget them and say, haha. But of course, for each person they bring in, maybe they get $2,000 each victim that they bring into the scam center. And if you can bring, 10 people in a month, that's a fair bit of money, especially if you come from an extremely impoverished background.
How often do people who are working in these scam centers who start, sending covert messages out in their communications to their targets?
Yeah, absolutely. We get a lot of covert messaging that come in, mostly because there's kind of the word of mouth. So people get out, they tell you these guys can be trusted, and then they allow those friends that they had built the camaraderie inside. They feed back to them and say, "Hey, these guys can be trusted." Then they start to kind of talk to you. They're so fearful that if they get caught talking to you, they're in so much trouble.
Sure.
And so they start to message you kind of on the private and, always wanting to delete messages, always wanting to make sure they're careful about what they say. In order to be able to effectively make a dent, we need the victims to come forward. If they come forward, we'll also find where that money leads to, and law enforcement can go in and actually apprehend that.
It's an enormous industry, and the technology that they use is disturbing. I mean, the more I've learned about them, the more they strike me as sort of having the tech savviness and cutting edge sort of approach of an Amazon. Is there any technology you guys can be implementing to help you with this?
I think that's one of the hardest parts is their technologies are so far more advanced than what we've got on the outside. They spent the first beginnings of their years updating and preparing themselves for this exact reason. Most of the victims that we were rescuing at the beginning of all of this, like around 2022, they all had PhDs in computer programming science. They're
Wow.
engineers. And so they went in specifically to engineer AI technology, specifically to engineer under the cryptocurrency world, and they set up programs that outside we're 2 years behind in terms of the technology. And so it is very hard to fight what they're doing for this reason.
Why are the platforms not being held to account?
The beautiful thing about cryptocurrency is everybody has their unique identifying account number, right? So it's the management that actually deal with those numbers, and those management are tight-lipped, they're secure, so we're not getting those codes. The second part is the victims in the West. They are afraid to come forward. They are embarrassed to come forward. And so we don't get to speak to them enough, not enough of the, and so you talk about the person that you interviewed in the last podcast, or and they were able to kind of trace through and follow where they had lost their money, and Binance was able to reimburse them. Why can't we do that more often? Because people have not come forward. And so if
I've
they
not,
don't come forward, if the victims don't speak
yeah.
out, then we can't trace where those numbers were.
Well, I'm not actually even saying that. What I'm saying is that the reason we now have so many safety measures when we use we tap with Apple Pay or whatever, or we use our debit card, is because the banks were forced to start paying reimbursing you when you got scammed. And so suddenly, you've got all these measures,
Yeah.
facial recognition, what have you. These platforms are making money off these transactions.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, let's look at it as a business, right? Who's going to voluntarily cost themselves billions of
Nobody. That's I'm not
dollars?
talking about voluntary. That is
So,
not what law enforcement is for.
but with law enforcement, they have to have proof. So you either have to have the victim at one end or the victim at the other end
Yeah.
share that information. And if that information is shared, they can enforce it. And if the information is not shared, they can't. Majority that are coming into the scam centers are being brought in by recruiters that they know. It's a sad story when you talk to somebody and they say, I've been friends since high school, and they tricked me into coming here.
What do you advise to somebody who's looking for a job and gets an offer to go to? I assume you're no safer flying to Dubai. You could get reeled out to some ridiculous place there as well.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, that's the catch 22, right? I think that what we're seeing now and what we're trying to look at in terms of the prevention side of things is, what do you say to people? Well, if it's too good to be true, it is. I mean, and that's the thing, is that of course, we're looking for the top dollar, but if the top dollar is just too top, um, perhaps double think, double check what it is. Another one would be, if you're taking a job somewhere, take a friend or family member with you. You're setting up a new life, don't go alone. Go with somebody, so that a company is not the company, these companies are not going to accept someone who's outside of like their control. They it would negatively affect them. So when you arrive at
Sure.
the airport with an extra person, oh, this is my mum and my dad that's with me, suddenly it's like red flags for the company that might not. And I know it sounds stupid, but I mean, like, if you
No, it
are
doesn't sound
looking
stupid.
at
It's just my stupid childish brain.
but if you don't turn up alone, and you turn up with a friend, you turn up with relative, you turn up with, I mean, they're less likely to keep you and follow all the way through. They're less likely to take the unknown person along with them because they haven't been vetted. They're not exactly sure what the system is, and they'll feel like they're being played. And what we're finding now with recruitment, the majority that are coming into the scam centers are being brought in by recruiters that they know. So family, relatives, friends. And it's a sad story when you talk to somebody and they say, I've been friends since high school, and they tricked me into coming here. And so I think that's the next thing, is be wary if your family have been working overseas or your friends have been working overseas and suddenly contact you with this incredible job opportunity that you can take, but then share very little information about what it is. And they're unable to like send photos from the company, or, their life outside of company walls.
How do you stay upbeat? That's a really depressing thought. I mean, you're saving people every day. I know you have. You told me that just before this started that there were 2 people or 4 people who just had appeared and were now waiting at a hotel room for you to go and help them. So is just knowing that every day you're changing people's lives?
I can tell you, sometimes, I mean, it's dark. It's a dark world. Sometimes you get really run down. You get so in the depths of it, and you just feel like this place is hopeless and the world is just, burning. And so, yeah, some days you have to kind of encourage yourself. And like you said, suddenly you get 4 people that call you and you think, okay, I'm going to be able to help them tonight. And they talk to you and they say, you've saved me, even though I haven't. But for them, in the moment in where they're at, with just such hopelessness and haven't eaten for a day and a half, and they don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, and you just bring this calm and, I guess, knowledge, information. I mean, that's really, I think, where I serve best now, is that after thousands of victims, I have the knowledge that they need to give them peace and to give them an
Sure.
understanding of what tomorrow is going to be. And I walk them through every single day until they're home.
And
And so,
you're being great with them, you
yeah, I
know.
think it's that, and just giving them that contact point and assuring them, and and then when it actually works out the way you say, then it gives them that little bit more confidence. Tomorrow we're going to do this, and then the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and then they put their trust in you, and they get home, and I think that's the joy of it. They called the godfathers being Singapore, and then they passed it to Taiwan that developed education, who passed it to China, who put everything on steroids and built it. There is way too much that has gone into this that it just suddenly popped up out of nowhere. It goes back years between the planning and putting in place, and even in terms of the investments within the regions of Myanmar. I mean, looking back at how they test ran it in other areas such as the Philippines, Cambodia, how they moved down, how they perfected the programming.
Who, who, and when?
We've traced it back. I mean, they call the godfathers being Singapore, Chinese from Singapore, that kind of dreamt up this idea, and then they passed it to Taiwan, that developed education, who passed it to China, who put everything on steroids and built it. And we see that, I guess, because when we look at where the funds have channeled through, originally lots of the funds that were laundered out of the beginning stages were paid out in Singapore. And so, what we said within our, I guess, the people in the know, is we said, they're paying the grandfathers. So they had to go back to originally paying off those, where the original idea came from. But then the compounds had different investors, and most investors either came from China or from Taiwan. Now the compounds themselves, they were purpose built from the ground up. There was no change in what the buildings looked like. They built the dormitories exactly the way they
Sure.
wanted them to house these people. They built the offices exactly how they wanted them. So the infrastructure for these cities went in from the ground up. Most of that area was sold, to the investors prior to COVID.
So it's like a real estate development.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, literally,
exactly.
or an industrial park. So you can invest in this, and these are where your offices will be, and this is where the operation will run, and you can even.
Yeah, and sadly, a lot of the investors didn't actually even know they were being scammed themselves. So you look at this development that's happening in this region, you're being told that they're going to be call centers. And so your family's back in mainland China, and you hear about this call center development that's happening in Myanmar, and you think, okay, maybe this is an area which we would invest in. And so you go to these real estate government, and that's the
And the
interesting thing
returns are
about this.
fantastic.
The returns are fantastic. And so in theory, but what happened
Sorry,
was, so you've
but
got
it's
all this region that's governed by the militia, right? Who then rented it or sold it to the main investors. They built the compounds, and then they rented those spaces to the companies that come in and fill them with the scamming centers. Those who actually built the buildings knew exactly how to design them for these scam centers.
no words. I mean, honestly, and it's only been a few years, and the magnitude of it is mind-boggling. How do you know when you've won? Like when they're on their way home back to the country, when they're out of the compound? Like what have you decided for yourself is a win so that you can celebrate that?
I think, when they get on their flight, yeah, that final message from the airport, and they're on their flight home. The beautiful thing about it is because you've spoken to them and given them such knowledge, and understanding, they're calm, and so even after a short jail sentence or a short immigration detention before their deportation, they're still so thankful at the end. Thank you for staying with me while I've been in the cells.
Sure.
Thank you for talking to me when I'm, and confirming this, and doing the other part for them. I think that's the key. But yeah, when they get on their flight, I'm able to, say bon voyage, and never delete them from my phone, but just let their name scroll down while the new ones are coming up, and the new victims are coming forward.
If you had a magic lantern and you could make one wish, other
Mm.
than just ending this altogether, but something a little bit more pragmatic, that would really make a difference for you, what would it be?
Obviously, I would love the scam compounds to close. I don't think that they're going to. I think the human trafficking and the abuses of the injustice of what happens and the abuses that happen to humans inside and the slavery I would like to see end. Um, I don't know if I have a big enough dream that I could see this entire enterprise shut down. I mean, that's the thing. It's like we'd like to end drugs, but they keep on,
Yeah,
rolling over. We'd like to end, these criminal systems, but I don't know if I ever have a dream big enough for that. But I would like to see the suffering of people ending.
we didn't really get into it, but the fact that you moved to Thailand, which I equate with serenity, calm, zen, and then you've had very little of that.
Yeah, very little in my life, but it's okay. It's good. It's worth it.
Yeah, it is. Thank you. All right. Go
Okay.
save those people, and thank you again.
Thank you very much, and thank you for giving me a voice on your platform. I think it's the second part of our jobs that we have to do is both rescue, but also we've got to tell the world so that they know.
And finally, thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. That way you'll be the first to see future episodes. And finally, if you know about an amazing story, please drop us a line. There's a contact down there somewhere below. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time.